And as you can see from the title of this video and the thumbnail, we're going to be creating a Halloween mosaic totem pole. Now I use the phrase totem pole a little loosely. So we want to do what we can to avoid grout bleed. By mixing up the placement of the horizontal grout lines, you'll be adding a little more interest to your mosaic. So listen up, friends, because this is super important. Remember, when tiling a glass on glass mosaic, especially if the glass is transparent. So here's a tip. Should you run into a piece of stained glass or maybe one of your flat back glass gems isn't cooperating and it keeps sliding down. Now that the adhesive is thoroughly mixed up, I got to work with hooking the beaded sections of wire over the rim of the witch substrate. Let's get to it. Welcome back. And if you're new here, my name is Julie. And on this channel, we talk about tips, tricks, tools, adhesives, materials, and specific mosaic projects, all to shorten your learning curve when it comes to creating mosaic art. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, please consider subscribing. I don't know about you, but I love Halloween. Cute Halloween. Tastefully chic Halloween. None of the gory stuff. And as you can see from the title of this video and the thumbnail, we're going to be creating a Halloween mosaic totem pole. Now I use the phrase totem pole a little loosely. If you aren't familiar with what a totem pole is, it's a beautiful and intricate carved wood pole, and it's created by indigenous people in the United States and Canada. Now, totem poles traditionally celebrate a community's benefits and identities by including spiritual beings, mythical figures, and sacred animals. Now, I can recall visiting Walt Disney World when I was little, and I loved seeing a totem pole in the Fort Wilderness campground. Maybe it was near around Pioneer Hall, and it highlighted carved wood cutouts from a giant log and featured traditional Disney characters like Mickey, Minnie, Goofy, Donald, Pluto, and of course Chip and Dale, because they're part of Fort Wilderness campground. But this just might be the first time that a totem pole came onto my radar. And honestly, I think totem poles are really, really cool. So fast forward to a few years ago when I was food shopping and spotted these yogurt pots stacked on top of each other in the refrigerated case. I immediately thought they'd be perfect substrates to make a Halloween themed totem pole for votives. This is why I say this Halloween mosaic idea is loosely a totem pole. The sentiment is there, at least. And if you're interested in making a fall or Halloween themed mosaic and you're looking for tutorials, maybe you're looking for ideas, or maybe you're just looking for inspiration to see what's been done already, I've got a whole playlist dedicated to the fall and Halloween tutorials that I've done here on my channel, and I'll include a link to that playlist down below in the description. So in today's video, we're going to turn glass yogurt pots into cute, fun Halloween decor from tiling the substrates all the way to grouting and finishing off. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. This totem pole idea came to me, as I said, a few years ago, so I've been collecting a few things here and there, just waiting to finally use them. As I mentioned, the substrates are actually glass yogurt pots which fit nicely on top of each other. Additionally, what I like about these yogurt pots is that they have a mostly straight side, which is really handy when you're tiling them. Plus, this lip up here at the top gives your mosaic work an automatic finished off edge. Now, I decided 3 yogurt pots was as high as I wanted to go. That's what I feel most comfortable with. If you don't feel comfortable with stacking the yogurt pots directly on top of each other, then I have another idea for you once we get to the finishing off step towards the end of this video. But first, let me quickly show you how I got the sticker off the yogurt pots and how I prepped them. Once I clean the substrate out, and let me tell you, I think it's chocolate vanilla variety, so good. I used a straight edge razor blade to carefully and gently pull the label off. So you want to go slowly And you'll get it off in one piece without any of the annoying leftover sticker residue or adhesive left on the substrate. But should you have either, then gently go over the affected areas with a straight edge razor blade. I put my cleaned off yogurt pots in the dishwasher and let them get super cleaned and sanitized from any food residue. If there's any leftover adhesive residue along the top, around the rim, this is where the lid or the cover was attached to the substrate, then you can go over that area as well with your straight edge razor blade. It comes off easily by going back and forth with the blade, and it goes without saying, but please be careful when working with a straight edge razor blade like this. This Halloween mosaic pole will be glass on glass, and it'll feature a jack-o'-lantern, a ghost, and a witch. So I got started with pulling stained glass for the character at the bottom of the totem pole, which will be the jack-o'-lantern. So I started by going through my box of orange stained glass in smaller pieces to see if I had any transparent or semi-transparent glass. So here's the thing. I not only want to stack the yogurt pots, but I also want to put a flameless votive inside each one of them to light it up. So I needed to look for stained glass in varying shades, which would let the votive light shine through. And I did the same thing with pulling white stained glass for the ghost votive. This will be the character on the yogurt pot in the center of the totem pole. And I discovered I really don't have a lot of semi-transparent white stained glass, but thankfully I was able to pull together a few shades. And lastly, I did the same thing with my green stained glass stash. And you guessed it, that's because the character who will be at the top of the totem pole will be the cute witch. So if you aren't sure if your glass is transparent or semi-transparent, here's an easy test. Just hold it up to a light or the window just to see how much light comes through. I know that some of the pieces that I pulled aren't going to allow a whole lot of light to shine through, especially using my dim flameless votives, but that's okay with me. And if you'd rather not work with sheets or larger pieces of stained glass, you can still make this Halloween totem pole by using smaller pre-cut pieces of stained glass. I'll include some options with links for you down below in the description. Next, I decided to cut strips of the stained glass which would cover the majority of each of the votives. So I cut the strips in even width sizes by lining them up on my waffle cutting grid. This is my favorite cutting surface, especially when cutting larger pieces of stained glass, because not only can I line up the glass to the grid, but it also keeps those teeny tiny little annoying glass shards in one place, which makes cleanup a breeze. Cutting the white glass definitely took me longer because I couldn't see the score line. I'm blind. So I'd score, break, then score, break, and so on. Now, usually I like to make a few scores before I break the score line, but thankfully I didn't have a lot to cut overall. So the green stained glass went quickly, and so did the orange stained glass. And here's what I've got to work with for this totem pole project. I also pulled some flat back glass gems in orange, white, and green to include in the design along with the stained glass. I love this color combo. It's time to get started with tiling, so we'll begin with the bottom character, which is the jack-o'-lantern. I'll start by cutting out the face from black stained glass. These are just scraps. I didn't cut these from a larger sheet. And I decided on a traditional jack-o'-lantern face of 2 triangle eyes and a cutout smiling mouth. I'm not using a pattern for the face. I just freehand drew it on the glass with a metallic permanent marker so it will show up for me. This makes a great guide when I'm cutting out the pieces, and don't worry, the permanent marker is easy to remove from the stained glass. I used my glass cutter and my wheeled glass nippers to cut out the face pieces. The adhesive for the majority of this Halloween totem pole is clear silicone. To keep the pot from rolling around or rolling off my work table, I'm using the lid of a small candle. The tile design around the body of the yogurt pot, not including the face of the jack-o'-lantern, will be strips and pieces of stained glass plus randomly placed flat-back glass gems. When creating a glass-on-glass mosaic, where you're using transparent and semi-transparent stained glass, you want to make sure you're applying adhesive to the entire back of each tessera you place. All of these items will be grouted with a dark grout, so we want to do what we can to avoid grout bleed. So grout bleed is a process when grout gets up under your adhered tesserae, and then you're able to see the grout from the front of your mosaic. So I'm applying the silicone directly to the back of each tessera. But then I'm going over it with a wood craft stick to spread the adhesive all around the back of each item. Is it a pain in the butt? Yeah, sort of, to be honest. But I also have to say, I got used to it as I kept going, and it became part of my tiling flow rather quickly. So by the way, tessera is another name for each piece of your materials. And in this case, each piece of stained glass or each flat back glass gem is a tessera. The plural version is tesserae, which is when you're talking about many pieces of your materials. And now we're at the end of tiling around the body of the jack-o'-lantern votive. Now, as you can see, I placed a flat back glass gem in a few spots, but I only used about 3 or 4 of them on each of the yogurt pots. This gives you a better idea of how I mixed and matched the strips of stained glass, even within the same vertical line. I didn't follow a color pattern. The only thing I did do was to try and keep a consistent grout line width as I was working around the substrate. And now we're ready to finish off the jack-o'-lantern's face. So I'm filling in this area using a lighter shade of orange stained glass, creating a lot of contrast to the glass I used around the majority of the yogurt pot. This is just a matter of either finding a piece that fits or cutting one to fit. And I'm applying the clear silicone in the same exact way as I did for the majority of the yogurt pot, by applying the adhesive to the back of each tessera and then spreading it out with the wood craft stick. Now, of course, sometimes you can put enough adhesive on the back where all you have to do is press your tessera up against the substrate and the adhesive will naturally spread itself out. And once you're done tiling your yogurt pot, you just want to take another look all the way around your substrate to make sure that your tesserae are exactly where you left them. In case you haven't picked up on this yet, as you're working with the silicone, silicone is a slippery adhesive and it takes a little bit of time for it to firm up, which is why you want to be conscious of where your fingers are as you're working. I do love the glass edge or the lip up at the top of the substrate. It allows the stained glass to sit neatly underneath it, which gives the mosaic such a clean, finished off look. I can't wait to see this grouted. By now you had enough time working with the silicone adhesive to know it can be annoying to get off of your hands and your nails. And I've got a solution for you to get your hands clean. Don't wash your hands with soap and water just yet. Instead, grab a bottle of olive oil from the kitchen. Yes, you heard me right. Olive oil. Pour a little bit of olive oil on a paper towel and then rub it all over your hands and your fingernails. Don't forget about underneath your fingernails as well. Then wash your hands like normal, and it might take a couple hand washings, but you'll get the olive oil off and your hands will be so super soft and no more sticky residue anywhere. The next yogurt pot in our Halloween mosaic totem pole is the ghost. I'm going to keep this one super simple with a minimal face of eyes and a mouth. And once again, I marked up black stained glass with a metallic permanent marker. And I got to work cutting the shapes out using my wheeled glass nippers. A glass grinder or sanding stone can help you smooth out any sharp or pointed edges and really get your glass to a beautiful curve. I adhered the glass pieces for the face to the substrate and compared it to the jack-o'-lantern face that we just finished. I just want to be consistent as far as the width of the faces. Then I was ready to get started tiling around the majority of the substrate in the same tiling pattern as we just did on the jack-o'-lantern. I'm using the strips of the white stained glass, which we cut a little earlier in the video, and I just adhered them to the substrate in whatever order I wanted. I'm trying to stagger the grout lines horizontally so that there aren't two next to each other. By mixing up the placement of the horizontal grout lines, you'll be adding a little more interest to your mosaic. I'm also adding random flat-backed glass gems in amongst the strips of stained glass, just like we did previously on the jack-o'-lantern. And just like I said earlier, watch where you place your fingers and also keep a lookout for your tesserae. Because that silicone is slippery, plus you got gravity in there too, so unfortunately they're both working against you and might pull your tesserae down to your work table. So here's a tip. Should you run into a piece of stained glass or maybe one of your flat back glass gems isn't cooperating and it keeps sliding down, just give them a little shimmy up against the substrate. It's just a little back and forth, and that'll cause enough friction to keep things in place better as you're waiting for the silicone to firm up a little bit. So regarding the messiness of the silicone, should you get any on your fingers, try to wipe it off first chance you get. This will not only keep the surface area of your tesserae clean from the adhesive, but it'll also keep things a little less frustrating when it comes to working with the clear silicone. Next, we need to tile the rest of the ghost's face. I went through my glass stash and found some semi-transparent white stained glass pieces which will work great. So I got to work breaking them down into smaller pieces and adhering them to the substrate. And just like that, we've tiled the ghost, and we'll let it sit and dry for at least 24 to 48 hours before we move on to the grouting. And before we move on to our third character in this Halloween mosaic totem pole, I'll include a list with links down below in the description for everything that I'm using in today's video. And here we are, ready to tile the third votive in this Halloween totem pole, and it's going to be a cute witch. I don't like scary and gory, so a cute witch is more of what I'm going for. Plus, if the jack-o'-lantern and ghost are both cute, the witch needs to be cute too. So I got started by pulling out a few of the flat back glass gems, looking for ones that had a nice round shape and were all about the same size. So here are the green strips of stained glass we'll be working with. There are 3 colors here, or 3 shades here, rather. And I'm starting this one differently than the jack-o'-lantern and the ghost. So at this point, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do for the witch's face. So I used my time wisely and got started adhering the strips of stained glass around the majority of the substrate. I used the previous 2 character face sizes as reference to make sure I was keeping the same size area open and clear for the witch's face. While I tiled the strips of stained glass and flat back glass gems, I kept thinking about the face design and how I wanted it to look. And yes, I'm tiling this area in the same exact way as the jack-o'-lantern and ghost votives. By adhering strips of stained glass in random order, making sure horizontal grout lines aren't next to each other, and also incorporating a random flat back glass gem here and there. Now just a reminder to make sure you cover the entire back of your tesserae with the silicone adhesive. Do what you can to help avoid grout bleed. Those woodcraft sticks work wonders in spreading the silicone on the back of your stained glass. As you're working, continue to check up on pieces you previously adhered to make sure everything is kept in place and will dry exactly where you left it. And now one last look before I move on to the witch's face. So the reason I wasn't sure initially about what I was going to do on the witch's face was because initially I was going to construct an ugly nose made from a clay-based adhesive. But the more I thought about it, the more I felt she needed to have a cute face, since the jack-o'-lantern and the ghost were both cute. So instead, I found a piece of dark green stained glass and I traced a nose onto it. Then I traced a slight smile onto a piece of black stained glass, and 2 circles onto black stained glass as well as part of the witch's eyes. I cut all of these out using my wheeled glass nippers and also smoothed the edges using my glass grinder. Now I ended up cutting 2 white circles as well and created a layered look for the eyes. So here's what I ended up with. Next, I adhered the witch's face to the substrate. And you'll see the black circles are smaller than I originally had them. I decided to sand them down to allow more of the white circles to show. Now that the face is adhered, I got started filling in the background. This glass is also leftover scrap shards from my glass stash. It's transparent glass in a few different shades of green. So listen up, friends, because this is super important. Remember, when tiling a glass-on-glass mosaic, especially if the glass is transparent, you want to make sure that not only the substrate is clean, but you also want to make sure that the surface of each tessera, so this is the surface area where you'll be applying your adhesive, you want to make sure that it's totally clean. Because once your tesserae are adhered to the substrate, anything on the surfaces of the substrate or the tesserae will forever be sealed in and visible on your mosaic. And here she is, all tiled and ready to sit and dry for at least 24 to 48 hours before moving on to the grouting step. Now, when I sent this picture to my best friend, she said the witch could also be Frankenstein, which I think would be really cute too. But let me know, I'm curious if you can think of any other Halloween characters, cute, preferably, not gory, which would work well in a Halloween mosaic totem pole like this. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Okay, all 3 votives have been sitting here for at least 24 hours and now we're ready to grout. Now I decided on using black grout for this project because not only is it a traditional Halloween color, but also black will look great with all 3 of these characters. I recently did a video here on my channel on how to create black grout and thinset, and I'll include a link to that video down below in the description. So I got started by grouting the jack-o'-lantern first. And I put a little on the substrate and then I carefully started rubbing it into the grout line in a clockwise, counterclockwise motion. I say carefully because we're working with grouting stained glass, and no doubt there's the possibility of maybe a couple sharp points. So I want to try and avoid not only tearing up my gloves, but also getting cut. I'm just making sure that I've got grout in all of the grout lines. I'm also making sure that I run a little grout along the bottom of my tile work to create a nice clean edge. And once I was done, I moved on to the ghost votive, going about it in the same way as the jack-o'-lantern. Clockwise, counterclockwise motion, pushing the grout into the grout line. Now, as you can see, these items aren't very big and they don't take very long to grout. Glass on glass generally doesn't take as long to grout. Plus the glass doesn't retain moisture and it isn't very thick, so it takes less grout and work to push the grout into the openings between the stained glass. And then finally, I moved on to the witch. And again, I went about grouting in the same exact way. Slowly, in a clockwise, counterclockwise motion, pushing the grout into the openings. And don't forget to take care of the grout on the top and bottom of each of the 3 votives by running your fingers along the edges to create a nice clean line where your mosaic work ends. It just finishes it off nicely. And I'll let them sit and dry for about 10 to 15 minutes before I come back and clean them up. The 3 characters have been sitting here drying a bit. I know they look like an awful mess, but thankfully it's time to clean them up. And I'll do that in the same way as I put the grout on, by rubbing the grout off in a clockwise, counterclockwise motion. So you want to make sure that you aren't digging into the grout line. You don't want to remove the grout from that area. You only want to remove the grout that's on the surface area of your stained glass. And again, I'm taking my time with this because I'm aware that there may be some sharp points and I don't want to rip a hole in my gloves or get cut. Although I think that has happened. I can feel it in one of my fingers. I like to do an initial step of removing the bulk of the grout, and then I go back in and clean up the surface area of the stained glass even more. But definitely get the bulk of the grout off first, and then worry about cleaning up and being more intentional with exposing all of the edges of your tesserae. So once the bulk of the grout is off, you want to look over your mosaic. You want to make sure that any points are exposed, any edges are exposed. You know, sometimes corners can get covered up and then they don't get cleaned out, and the same can go for edges as well. So just be really scrupulous and look over your 3 characters and make sure you're happy with how the grout lines look, because this is how it's going to dry. And also at this time, I like to clean out the inside of each character as well. Sometimes grout can get rubbed in there on the inside if you're holding the substrate while grouting, or little pieces can accidentally fall in there. So I just want to make sure that the inside is free of any grout as well. And now I'll let them sit and fully dry for at least 24 hours before I come back for the next step. And now we're ready to attach the witch's hair. And I gotta tell you, I went back and forth in my mind as far as what to do about her hair. I could envision it, but I didn't know how I was going to bring that to fruition, because working with wire and beads and, you know, that's just not generally my wheelhouse. And so I really had to think about, how can I get the beaded hair attached to the votive? And I gotta say, I absolutely love how the witch turned out. It's exactly as I had hoped. And let me show you how I did it. I knew I wanted her hair to be beads. So I went through my bead stash and found 3mm glass beads in light gray, dark gray, and black. And I decided on 19 gauge wire because it's just stiff enough to support a section of beads. With wire cutters, I cut 3 different lengths of wire: short, medium, and long. When I beaded these sections of wire, I beaded the most in the medium length. I did about 36 of those, followed by the short length. I made about 30 of those, and then only about 12 of the long length. However, let me just say that I ended up not using all of the short and medium length. So to get started, I used needle nose pliers to create a squared off U shape at one end of the wire. This is going to be the end which hooks on to the substrate rim. And then I started adding beads to that section of wire and included all 3 colors: the light gray, the dark gray, the black. And I did that in random order. Once I got close to the end of the wire, I used the needle nose pliers again to curl up the wire towards the beaded section. So doing this kept the beads on the wire. And this is how I created each of the lengths of beaded wire. Now, this is definitely a somewhat mindless task that you can do while listening to music or a podcast or talking on the phone, but it was also oddly therapeutic. Once I felt I had enough beaded sections of wire, I was ready to attach them to the witch substrate. To keep the wire hooks in place on the substrate, I'm going to use a clay-based adhesive. So for those of you who are familiar with epoxy sculpt, this is the same type of adhesive. When I was ready to use my epoxy sculpt, I discovered it was completely dried out and hard, so I decided to buy another brand which folks have been asking about here on my channel, and I'm glad I gave it a spin because it's good stuff. So this one that I got is called Epoxy Sculpt Clay. It is less expensive than the epoxy sculpt and it works the same way. It's just like epoxy sculpt and comes in two parts, part A and part B, which you have to mix together in equal quantities at the time you're ready to use it. It's waterproof and self-hardening. It really is handy stuff to have in your mosaic studio. So I mix up the adhesive and I just eyed the quantities. I didn't measure to make sure I had exactly equal quantities of each part, so don't stress yourself out about that too much. And to mix it up, you just knead it with your fingers, turning it into itself over and over. So as you can see, I'm wearing gloves for this process just to protect my skin. I don't know that you would want to be touching this stuff either, but it's personal preference. Now that the adhesive is thoroughly mixed up, I got to work with hooking the beaded sections of wire over the rim of the witch substrate. I started by placing the longest sections first since I have fewest of those. I tried to space them out evenly along the rim. And then I started filling in the sections between the long beaded sections with the medium length and the short length beaded wire. Now I placed these sections in random order and didn't think too much about it, but tried to make sure I included ample amounts of the medium length beaded wire. Those were sort of my priority. I filled up the rim as much as I could with the various lengths of beaded wire. And then once I was happy with how the witch's hair looked, I went in and covered the hook portion of each of the beaded sections of wire on the inside of the substrate with the Epoxy Sculpt Clay adhesive. I pressed it up against the sections of wire and the substrate. So this is why I made the square off U shape in the wire so that it snugly fit the rim of the substrate and stayed more in place as I covered it with the adhesive. A couple of the hooks on the beaded sections of wire did move around a little bit, and I put them back in place and made sure that they were covered again with the adhesive. How I place the adhesive on the wire isn't exactly pretty or neat, but I was basically just concerned with covering the hook portions of the wires to begin with. And once I got them all covered, I went back over the adhesive with a wood craft stick to gently clean up and get rid of some of the excess adhesive. I was careful not to disturb the wire hooks which were in place, but I still moved a few of them, which I put back into position and recovered with the adhesive. Now, cleaning up the excessive adhesive isn't necessary. After all, no one's going to look inside your substrate and see that you've got extra adhesive. So it's more a matter of me knowing there's excessive adhesive around the rim and I don't want it there. Also, if you have excessive amount of adhesive around the rim, you may have too small of an area for the votive to come down into your substrate, so you also want to consider that. Another little tip is to curl up the beaded sections of wire so that they aren't touching your tabletop, so that the weight of the beads helps to pull the hooks down onto the rim of your substrate as that adhesive dries. And then I let the witch sit for at least 24 hours before I touched it. Avoid the temptation once you get everything in place. Just let it dry. Okay, it's been 2 days and now I'm gonna work on making her hair a little more, maybe not crazy, but just like lively. Yes, the adhesive is dry, but I'm still holding on to the area where the beaded wire is attached to the substrate rim. This is out of an abundance of caution as I bend and wrangle the beaded sections. You can make her hair as wild or as calm as you like. I wanted her hair to be just, you know, whatever. And that's why I made 3 different lengths of wire. And all I'm doing is bending the wire slightly to give it a little life and movement. Nothing crazy. But because the wire is so wonderful, it'll do whatever you want it to do. So if you want her hair to be totally crazy, then you can have it that way. And once I was done, I put the whole completed totem pole together along with the flameless votives. There are so many flameless votive options on the market these days. You've got bright, you've got dim, there's realistic flickering, there's a static flame as well. You pick. And of course, we can't have a witch without a hat. And I was so excited with the witch's hat that I found because it is the perfect size for this substrate. Now, if you don't feel comfortable stacking the substrates directly onto each other and you're afraid that they may move or topple over, I've got an option for you. I found lids which fit these substrates perfectly. You can leave them as is in this unfinished wood color, which is very pretty, or you can paint them whatever color you like using acrylic craft paints. And remember, the shopping list with links is available down below in the description for everything that I used in today's video. Oh, I'm so excited that the Halloween totem is done, and it turned out, I think it turned out even better than I imagined. Personally, I think the witch's hair is like, bam, what? We are halfway done. Wow. That's where it's at. For me. Yes, I love mosaics and yeah, all that good stuff, but it's the witch's hair for me that really kind of brings things together. Is my voice starting to go? Oh no, we're just beginning. Me, 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 me. Beaker from the Muppets. Me, 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 me. Thank you so much for being here, spending a little bit of your day with me. And if you make a Halloween votive, I would love to see it. Please tag me on Instagram. I am always up for looking at mosaics and especially Halloween mosaics. I feel like Halloween doesn't get enough respect. I will see you soon. Take care and be well. For more mosaic inspiration, check out one of these 2 videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye!